Welcome into Words with Wallace. I'm your host, Nick Wallace, coming at you. It is Monday, December 9th. What is up, everybody? First and foremost, apologies for the delay in getting you guys this episode. I know I missed another episode last week. That being said, if you're watching on the YouTube, you can see made some upgrades to the home studio. If you're not watching on the YouTube, your loss, first and foremost. Second of all, we got a little Christmas tree in the background. We got a TV now in the background that's right now spreading some holiday cheer. We got a little virtual fireplace set up. Real cozy in here. Love to keep it festive here at Words with Wallace. But yes, again, I apologize for missing an episode. Not only was I busy doing some stuff after moving last month, getting some stuff settled in the house, just didn't watch as much NBA as I would have liked to last week and didn't exactly know what direction I wanted to go with the episode. And most importantly, again, I know I don't make any money off this podcast right now, but that being said, I do really pride myself on watching as much NBA as possible. Obviously, the priority is watching full games whenever I can, but that being said, there's between 5 and 10 games some nights, so it's important that even for the games I didn't watch the full game, to see the highlights, to at least see the box score, see what happened in every game. So I feel like I'm doing my job in following the NBA as closely as possible, and just didn't feel like that was the case last week. So we're back, though, and we definitely have a light slate of games this week because it is NBA Cup week. So we're going to talk about what that means, what 8 teams ultimately made the NBA Cup and have a chance to compete for the $500,000 each and to play in Vegas, all the attention that comes with that. We will talk about that momentarily. I will be predicting who, of course, is going to win the NBA Cup, and most importantly, why do we care? But before we do that, just wanted to touch upon a few different teams here that I think are either trending up or trending down. Spoiler alert, none of these teams are in the NBA Cup, so we're not going to talk about them organically in this episode. The first team that I wanted to talk about, the Memphis Grizzlies. They are absolutely on fire. They are trending up right now, 9-1 in their last 10 games, including a really big win in Boston the other day against my Celtics. So right now the Memphis Grizzlies are up to being the 2 seed in the West. Only OKC has a better record in that conference. And just my takeaway after watching the Grizzlies closely in that game against the Celtics is already knew that they were really deep, but especially now that all their guys are healthy or mostly healthy at this point in time, you can just see how fantastic Memphis has been in nailing unrestricted free agents, late round draft picks, and just fortifying their young core of Ja Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Desmond Bane. The Grizzlies are just loaded. They have guys like Luke Kennard, who was a big pickup for them a couple years ago. He's getting DNPs some nights, only playing between 5 and 10 minutes. A fantastic three-point shooter that I feel like should be getting real minutes on a competitive team in the Western Conference, but that hasn't been the case. Marcus Smart, who I love, his first real return to Boston, we'll say. I think they did a video tribute for him last year, but since he wasn't playing for the Grizzlies last year, this was his first game actually healthy enough to play for the Grizzlies in Boston. Played pretty awful against the Celtics, and I'm not going to lie, I love Marcus Smart, but he's been pretty brutal for the Grizzlies lately, shooting the ball really poorly. Obviously, he's had some moments, but he's really just an energy guy off the bench for them. It doesn't seem like there's any plans to move him into the starting lineup, and with the team rolling, I don't know why they would. And on top of that, Memphis has guys that were huge contributors for them last year. And I know last year was just the season from hell from the Memphis Grizzlies, but 2 guys in Gigi Jackson and Vince Williams that were kind of the highlights of the entire season. Gigi Jackson was the youngest player in the NBA last year. Maybe he still is. I don't really know. Just a fantastic three-point shooter, and Vince Williams, a rangy wing that plays defense at a really high level. Both of those guys aren't even playing right now for Memphis, so they're still not fully healthy. And just in general, I love the way all their guys just attack no matter what. No matter who's out there, they're always looking to attack the basket. Kind of had a weird defensive strategy against the Celtics where, look, I'm going to sound like a homer here, so let me just come out and say it. I think the main reason why the Celtics lost is they looked absolutely whooped being on the second half of a back-to-back after a really emotional win over the Milwaukee Bucks the night previously. The Celtics just looked like they were gassed out there and not as locked in as they should have been against Memphis. And on top of that, poor shooting was also to blame for the Celtics losing. Memphis made the decision to just leave Drew Holiday wide open, which is really interesting. I know Drew's struggled to shoot the ball quite a bit this year, but last year he was notoriously a great three-point shooter, over 40% from the year, and I think led the NBA in corner three-point shooting percentage, and he shot about 6 corner threes against Memphis and finished the game shooting 4 of 17 from 3. They just left him wide open seemingly all game. That must have been a strategic decision where Drew is just the lesser of the evils that the Celtics have on the court out there. And so That being said, weird game overall, but it's still impressive for any team to go in, play the defending champs on the road, and get a big win. That just shows you that Memphis is no joke. And I wasn't taking them lightly before that, but maybe I was too low on them before the season. I just think that it's been a while since we've seen that team healthy. The Western Conference is clearly better now than what it was a couple years ago when Memphis was making playoff runs and whatnot. So I do just think the Grizzlies are pretty legit and wanted to draw some attention to them, even though they won't be competing in the NBA Cup. Moving forward, we have to talk about a team that is trending downward, and that is the Denver Nuggets. They're 5-5 in their last 10 games, and the real reason I wanted to bring them up is because Jokic just had a bonkers game the other night, a completely ludicrous stat line that resulted in a loss to the worst team in basketball, the Washington Wizards. Jokic put up 56 points, 16 rebounds, and 8 assists in that loss to the Wizards. And so, what does that really mean? Jokic is obviously just on a different level than anybody else in the NBA. He's clearly the best player in the league, in my opinion. He should also be the front runner for MVP. But I'm looking at that game individually, and I know it's way too early to be talking about awards. Does that performance even help Jokic, his case for MVP or not? Because he just put up crazy numbers, and I don't believe that those are empty set stats, so to speak, but maybe I'm a little biased here. But if the Nuggets don't step it up and they're not a top 5 or 6 seed in the Western Conference, what is separating this year of Jokic compared to those Westbrook years? And the guy who actually watches the games inside of me would say that Jokic is a much better player than Westbrook ever was. And while I absolutely believe that to be true, I just want to at least see the other side of that argument and just saying, at what point do these stats start becoming empty if the Nuggets aren't able to pull out wins in these games? And it's kind of just a funny concept. I saw it online, and so I just wanted to share that with you guys. But I'm not panicking yet on the Nuggets, but I do think it's just really puzzling because I think the offseason was just a really bad scene for the Nuggets in general. The fact that they weren't able to fortify this roster around the best player in the world right now is pretty embarrassing. That the Nuggets and ownership and the front office didn't have more of an all-in mentality to maximize Jokic's prime, which is obviously happening right now, while teams like Boston clearly weren't afraid to get to that first apron, second apron, do whatever it takes to maintain a title contending team. Denver just doesn't seem to have the same priorities, and I don't know what moves there were to be made, and I'm still not an expert on this salary cap by any means, but it's just disappointing that I think that they just kind of took the L in the offseason by not really making this team any better. But that being said, they still have some wins this year. Christian Braun looks legit as a starter, plays with a lot of energy, consistently producing stats for the team this year. I think I saw something crazy that he's never had less than 12 points in any game this year, which I felt was really odd considering guys like LeBron have been below that mark in recent games. So the consistency from Christian Braun is kind of unexpected. They just got Aaron Gordon back in the fold. I think Julian Strawther still has some really nice moments and can shoot the ball pretty consistently. Peyton Watson is obviously a freak on defense. So they have a rotating cast of guys to step into that KCP role that I think can prove to be contributors for Denver, especially during the upcoming playoffs or the playoffs later in the year, I should say. But it's still just not enough where the team is kind of middling. They're at the 7th seed in the Western Conference right now. So again, I'm not panicking. I think that the biggest cause of concern is just Jamal Murray and him just clearly not being the same guy that we've seen from Jamal Murray the past couple years. I don't know if he's not at 100% or if he just doesn't really warm up until April or what his deal is. But I don't think that guy's lost it at 27 years old or whatever he is. I'm sure he's going to end up being just fine. But until then, they just need Jokic to keep scoring at a ridiculous clip. And I'll tell you right now, that's not how Jokic wants to play. Even in a win yesterday over the Hawks, the Nuggets needed Jokic to put up, I think, 48 points yesterday. And again, you could look at these numbers and just be like, wow, Jokic is amazing. But for those that have watched Denver enough, they just know that that's not how Jokic wants to play. And so it's probably a bad sign if he's having to drop 40 points or more most nights just to stay competitive and win games against mediocre teams. So really concerning loss for the Nuggets the other night, but ultimately they should be all right. They're still going to be a playoff team. I'm just monitoring what's going on in Denver and if there are any moves that they can make before the deadline. Finally, before we preview the final few rounds of the NBA Cup here, I just wanted to talk about a website here as an NBA nerd that I've really loved. And no, this is not a paid ad. This is completely free press just because I am a massive basketball nerd. And for anybody that is watching minute 10 of a Words with Wallace podcast, you're probably a massive NBA nerd as well and might enjoy checking out this site. It's called shotcreator.com. It's an incredible and also free website that combines both stats and game film from NBA games. And so It's really hard to explain. I would encourage you guys to definitely check it out. Again, it's completely free of charge. It looks like they're in like the beta version of the website right now, so obviously early stages here, and I don't know if there's any big changes to come or what their deal is. They have a pretty strong presence online. I follow their account on Twitter, X, whatever, and nonetheless, it's really like a database where you can access like entire games, like plays from individual games, highlights from individual games, shot charts of every player in the NBA, and even the ability to sort by specific player or even a specific shot. And by that I mean, like, let's say, you're not a Spurs fan, but everybody loves watching Victor Wembanyama. If you wanted to see every single one of Victor Wembanyama's blocks in their loss to the Suns the other night, you could look that up and they could pull those individual plays. You can pull up every single Wembanyama dunk throughout the entire season, and they will pull individual, like between 5 and 10 second clips of every single one of those plays. And if you're more into it for the stat side of things and the film side of things, then you can search by like specific shots on the court. And I'm not just talking about, dunks or 3-pointers or things you can find on a traditional box score, but you can look up like, hey, who leads the league in step backs? That would be Luka leads the league in step backs at 7 attempts per game, and Harden's right behind him at 5 attempts per game. And, another random stat that I learned just like fooling around the website, that Charlotte Hornets have the 2 league leaders in 3-point attempts, which is kind of crazy. Like LaMelo leads the NBA at 13.1 3-point attempts per game, and Brandon Miller is right behind him at 10.9 attempts per game. So I know that might have been super not interesting for some of you guys out there, but I love it. It's been really cool. I haven't really used it to research anything yet. Like, I'm just kind of messing around and seeing what the site can do and how it can help me for podcasts, how it can help me better understand teams that I might not have the chance to watch full games of. But either way, really cool resource that could, again, combines stats in the NBA, combines advanced numbers for nerds of the game like myself, and more importantly, the film to actually watch what is happening when all these games are happening simultaneously. So definitely check out shotcreator.com. All right, let's move on and talk about the NBA Cup. First and foremost, who is even in the NBA Cup? Who has a chance of winning this thing? Who do we think is actually going to come away victorious, and why should we even care about it? So first and foremost, I actually just noticed, for those watching on YouTube, that we have like an ad that is now playing on the Fireplace channel on my Roku TV. So that's really disappointing. We're just airing these ads. I'm going to get some copyright mark against me because I got like some weird medicine commercial taking place behind my head. Anyway, keeping it moving here to the NBA Cup. So overall thoughts before I go into like exactly who made it. I'm a little bummed. The Celtics did not make it. And my biggest complaint about the NBA Cup so far is just like the frustration over the final night and just trying to keep track of what teams are scoring what points. And while I do love that the point differential matters for the group stage play into who ultimately makes it to the quarterfinals, the semifinals, etc., it's just frustrating having all these games happening simultaneously. So you're trying to get a handle on if the team is in or out. I actually thought the Celtics were going to be in because there was a big enough point discrepancy between the Bucks and the Pistons, but I guess the Magic had such a positive point differential already. Even though that they lost, they ended up getting the wild card spot. So anyways, needless to say, I'm a little bummed as a Celtics fan, so excuse me if I'm a bit bitter. But ultimately, the teams that made it. Let's start in the Eastern Conference. The 1 seed overall, your Milwaukee Bucks. The 2 seed overall, the New York Knicks. 3 seed, the Hawks. And the 4th seed, aka the wild card, is the Orlando Magic. Moving on to the Western Conference, the 1 seed is the Thunder, the 2 seed is the Rockets, 3 seed is the Warriors, and the 4 seed is the Dallas Mavericks. So it's a traditional bracket from here. This is the only part of the tournament that's actually easy to understand. 1 is going to play 4 in each conference, 2 is going to play 3 in each conference, and the winners of those matchups will advance to the semifinals, which take place in Las Vegas. So we're going to preview these individual games because these are some pretty interesting teams I want to have the chance to talk about either way. So let's start off with the first game tomorrow, or maybe even the day of when you guys are hearing this on Tuesday the 10th. We have the Magic at the Bucks. So this is, again, the 1-4 seed in the Eastern Conference. This should have been a really fun game, and I'm afraid it's not going to be. Obviously, we're going to see what happens, but we have some really crappy news out of Orlando that I normally would have mentioned at the top of the episode, but here we are talking about the Magic, so I knew we'd get to it. Franz Wagner, a guy that I just talked about on the previous podcast who was playing amazing, is now out with a torn oblique. And the reason that that's significant is, first of all, super rare injury without a definitive timetable to return. So we don't know when Franz is going to be back. But second of all, this is the same exact injury that Paolo Banchero suffered back in October when he just ripped off a crazy run for the Magic. And it's just a really disappointing situation for the Magic team that I've loved watching over the past couple years, that despite the injury to their best player in Paulo, Franz has kept this team afloat. Even better than that, they're the 3 seed in the Eastern Conference. Like, he was playing the best basketball of his career. And now a freaky injury, the same exact injury, is now inflicted upon the 2 best players on the Orlando Magic. So that is a bummer. And I don't want to spend a ton of time previewing these games because some of you guys might be hearing this after this game's already played or whatever, but I don't need to spend a lot of time on this because frankly, I just don't see a way in which the Magic have the offensive firepower to hang in the game against the Bucks with how the Bucks are playing right now. Like, luckily for Magic fans, the silver lining is, like, again, you have a decent cushion because you are the 3 seed in the Eastern Conference, and now maybe you get to see what Jet Howard has in the tank. He was a lottery pick for you guys last year. If I was the Magic just for this specific game on Tuesday, I would just play Jonathan Isaac 40 minutes, and he plays like, between 15 and 20 minutes. I'd just play him 40 minutes in the game, put him on Giannis the entire game, and see what happens. We would be in for a really exciting matchup, and maybe one of the few guys on the planet that can somewhat physically hang with Giannis. I mean, honestly, I haven't watched a ton of Jonathan Isaac this year, but I know some of his defensive highlights last year were pretty special. So, just talking about the Bucks real quick, they're rolling as well. They're 8-2 in their last 10 games, and one of those losses was something I'd mentioned briefly earlier in the episode, the loss to Boston on the road on what I believe was Friday night, if I'm not mistaken. That was a really fun game, by the way. Huge win for the Celtics to beat Milwaukee. I know they were at home and whatnot, but the Bucks had Middleton back. The Celtics were missing a couple of guys. They didn't have Kristaps, and the Celtics shot the ball pretty terribly from 3 and still found a way to win. So that was a big win for the Celtics, but needless to say, going 8-2 in your last 10 games, if you're the Bucks, and one of those losses against the defending champs, you can't be too upset. They just got Chris Middleton back, who obviously Bucks fans who are listening to this know how valuable Chris Middleton has been for that team for many, many years. One of the most underrated players in the NBA. Dame is looking better. Giannis is still super locked in. So, needless to say, I am going with the Bucks to win tomorrow on Tuesday the 10th in the quarterfinal NBA Cup game. The second game of the night, this is where stuff gets interesting. I truly think that 3 out of the 4 matchups are really interesting, and we just knocked out the only matchup that I'm not super excited about. We have Mavericks at Thunder tomorrow night after the Bucks game. I'm thinking that this, and I'm hoping that this game adds to what will be a very fun rivalry between the Mavericks and the Thunder for years to come. I'm not exactly an expert of like southwestern geography in the country, despite living in Texas for the past 3 years. But to my understanding, Oklahoma City is pretty close to here, right? Like it is not too far away to go from OKC to Dallas. And so I'm pretty fired up about it. Maybe there's even some teams that travel to OKC. I know they have fantastic fans. Obviously, the Mavericks got the best of the Thunder last year in the playoffs. Both of these teams are absolutely on fire. Luka's back for the Mavericks after the Mavericks ripped off a really nice run without Luka Doncic. Like, Kyrie stepped into that role seamlessly as a primary playmaker for the team. All the role players that Dallas acquired in the offseason are hooping. Even Spencer Dinwiddie, who I can't stand. He started the year pretty brutal, but he's had some clutch moments for the Mavs the past couple games, I can't lie. And then on the Oklahoma City side of things, still no Chet, which is scary how good this team has been even without Chet Holmgren, but they recently got Isaiah Hartenstein back, and he looks like a perfect fit in Oklahoma City. It is just really fascinating to have a career like Isaiah Hartenstein, who he bounces around as like a backup center for a couple years, and then suddenly in like year 6 or 7, whatever it was last year, he's like, just, wow, this guy can really play make. Like, wow, this guy plays with a ton of heart. Like, suddenly his role increases, and like the next thing you know, in like the first game of the season that the Thunder have him, Isaiah Hartenstein's like operating all these like dribble handoffs and setting screens, and they're running offense through him, and he just looks like such an awesome fit in OKC. He's filling up the stat sheet. He's a really a monster on defense, the only guy on that team with any sort of size. So I think in this matchup, going back to Mavericks at Thunder, it's really anybody's game, and we're just predicting single game matchups in the NBA, which can be tricky. But I'm not going to get cute. I'm going to take the home team, the Oklahoma City Thunder. They're undefeated in NBA Cup play, and I expect that to continue just because I think that they are going to want this a little bit more than Dallas. I just trust what I've seen from OKC. I think they're going to want it more. They're going to be playing at home, so I am going to take the Thunder to advance past Dallas on Tuesday. Moving on to the Wednesday games, we have a pretty unique Eastern Conference matchups. We have the Hawks at the Knicks. And like, what the hell do we do with the Atlanta Hawks, first and foremost, right? Because I should mention, the fact that the Hawks are even here, like, I had 2 teams coming out of that group, whatever it was, Group C in the Eastern Conference, and call me crazy, I picked the Celtics and the Cavs to advance from this group. I expected there to be a wild card from this group. Nope, only one team advanced, and it was the Atlanta Hawks. They beat the Celtics by 1 point on the road in Boston in the first night of the NBA Cup. And then they followed it up by beating the Cavs not once, but twice. Only one of those matchups against Cleveland was for the NBA Cup. But yes, the Atlanta Hawks actually beat the best team in basketball, the Cleveland Cavaliers, 2 consecutive games in like, it was either back-to-back nights or there was like one night in between. But absolutely crazy stuff out of the Hawks. This is the same exact team that also lost to the worst team in basketball, the Washington Wizards, in 2 consecutive games earlier in the year. So, no idea what to make of Atlanta. They're 13-12. They're the number 7 seed in the East. Clearly, they've proven they are capable of beating any team and also losing to any team in the NBA. I think they'll be on their game. They seem to have been a little bit more consistent lately. But I'll tell you right now, the Knicks on the other side of the ball know who they are, right? You can expect to see 40-plus minutes out of Jalen Brunson, Josh Hart, OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, and Karl Towns. Towns has been awesome for the Knicks, especially in particular games. Like, his stats compared to last year are absolutely through the roof. The Jalen Brunson, Karl Towns pick and roll seems to be like the most unstoppable play in basketball right now. But I'll tell you right now, you know who loves playing in New York? Trae Young. Trae Young loves playing in New York. Yes, we are throwing it back to what, like 3 years ago when the Hawks made that Eastern Conference Finals run. It's always kind of fun when these teams match up. Like, for whatever reason, New York fans, and it kind of looks like I'm a Knicks fan right now, we're rocking this ugly-ass orange and blue hoodie. Knicks fans absolutely hate Trae Young with every fiber they're being. Like, I know some of like the side talk NYC stuff that you see online has gotten a little corny, but like the original videos of them shitting on Trae Young and like saying like fuck Trae Young when, you know, after like a Yankees win or something like that, that's always going to be funny to me. So I just think it's low-key, kind of like a rivalry game. Not really. I'm grasping at straws here, but the fact that the Hawks made it out of their really daunting group and they get matched up with New York Knicks for a fan base that really hates Trae Young, I think that's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm going to take the Hawks to upset the Knicks in New York because it's basically Trae Young's home arena. Let's keep it moving, talk about the final quarterfinal matchup that we know for sure, and that is going to be the Warriors at the Rockets playing after the Knicks on Wednesday night. This is a really fun matchup. I've been super high on the Rockets all year, and believe it or not, these are the only 2 teams that I called to actually advance to the quarterfinals of the NBA Cup. I went 2 of 8 overall. I think I had like the Celtics and the Cavs in there. I had the Nuggets in there. I was wrong on a bunch of different stuff. So hand up, 2 of 8 isn't great. I think we can strive to at least get 50% next year when we're predicting the NBA Cup. But it's really fluky with only a 4-game sample size. Needless to say, I was high on both the Warriors and the Rockets coming into the NBA Cup. And it's a super fun matchup between an older team and a younger team that's trying to really stamp themselves as a legit contender in the Western Conference. For Golden State, like it's kind of been the same old thing. They've slowed down a little bit after their hot start. Obviously, they've had some injuries, but overall, the past couple games, Kuminga's looked a lot better for them. Looks like he's coming on a bit, while Buddy Hield predictably has fallen back to earth. He does this every single stop. Like the first 2 weeks of the season, it was like, oh, Buddy Hield, what a fit. We should have seen this coming. He stepped into the Clay role. He's even better. But it's like every single stop of this guy's career, he plays incredible for the first month, and then by month 3, they're sick of him. I don't know where Golden State fans are at on Buddy right now. I'm sure it's not that bad, but needless to say, he's not the same dude that we saw to start the season, but it's a good thing that the Warriors have like 15 guys in their rotation still. And I just love the Rockets. Like, I just think that they play with so much energy. They have so many different lineups to turn to. I think it would still be great if they could shorten their rotation a little bit, maybe do like a 2-for-1 or a 3-for-1 trade to open up more minutes for guys like Reed Shepherd. But right now, I think the Rockets are the better team. They're playing at home. Their fans should be locked in. So I'm taking the Rockets to beat the Warriors. So that does it for the matchups that we actually know about in the NBA Cup, but let's just preview the rest of the tournament because there's only 3 more games, and I might as well shoot my shot at getting some of these predictions right after the first time around didn't go as planned. So we have the Vegas semifinal games that take place on this Saturday, December 14th, so obviously all the teams that win on Tuesday night and Wednesday night will advance to the semifinals, and if my predictions are correct, we're going to have 2 pretty fun matchups, the Bucks versus the Hawks and the Rockets versus the Thunder. Not going to spend a time analyzing these fake matchups because we're not even sure if they're going to happen, but just so we have it on the record, Bucks versus Hawks, I'm going to take the Bucks in that one. I think that ultimately they're the better team. I think they're going to want it a little bit more. I feel like the Bucks have a lot to prove right now. I feel like a lot of people are kind of taking them for granted. Again, the casual NBA fan has only flicked on like a game or 2 this year, and maybe they checked the standings when the Bucks were like 2-9, thinking they were in complete disarray, not realizing that Milwaukee has once again cemented themselves as one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference. So I expect them to take advantage of a less talented Hawks team. And moving on to the second matchup here, if my predictions are correct, we're going to have Rockets versus Thunder. And again, these games are going to be in Las Vegas. It's going to be on a neutral site. They're trying to promote a city that will eventually have an NBA team within the next couple years, I'm sure. So especially with this being on a neutral floor, I think the Rockets Thunder game is going to be awesome. We just had these two teams play an incredible overtime game last week, and when I thought I was going to record a pod last week, I actually took some notes on it, but it was just a really cool game. Fred VanVleet was absolutely cooking for the Rockets, and they ended up coming away with the win. And I think it's going to be back and forth. I think there's some really fun defensive matchups on both sides. I really wish Chet was playing in this game. I think Hartenstein versus Şengün is going to be a lot of fun. But since I just like love the Rockets, and maybe it's just because I like them, I like Ime, I like the team that they have in place, and maybe they're like the best team of this bunch that I'm still like not really that scared of as a Celtics fan. Maybe I shouldn't be saying that, but I think that the Rockets are a really fun story, and I think they're the perfect team to have a lot to prove during this NBA Cup. So I'm going to take the Rockets over the Thunder, which would lead us to a Rockets versus Bucks championship game. I think that would be a really fun matchup as well, but fuck it, give me the Rockets in that one too. I might as well just take Houston to go all the way and win the NBA Cup. Would be really embarrassing if they go out and lose on Wednesday night, but that's what I'm going to go with. I just think that there's a lot of young athletes on the Rockets that people in Milwaukee are really going to struggle to stay in front of. That feels like a Jalen Green game. I know he's pretty inconsistent night to night, but I just think the Rockets are a tough matchup for the Bucks, so I'm ultimately going to take them to win the NBA Cup. Before I let you guys go, I just wanted to give my final thoughts on year 2 of the NBA Cup. Like, we're 2 years into this thing, and where am I at on it? I mean, overall, my frustrations haven't changed that much. It still is pretty hard to explain. I'm not gonna lie. Like, as somebody that hosts a solo NBA podcast, you'd think I'd be a little bit better at explaining shit, but I had a conversation with a couple coworkers the other day, and it didn't go that well as far as explaining the NBA Cup. Like, all their questions were valid about, like, what days the games are, and if they added more games to the regular season, and what makes it different than a regular season game, and if it counts for both, and then overall, like, why do the players care about it? And the easiest way to explain that is they're motivated financially because they all get $500,000 each. But why should we care about it as fans, right? I think that we should care about it as fans if A, the players show that they care. If there is a heightened level of competitiveness during these last 7 NBA Cup games, especially now that we're in the single elimination phase, and players are locked in and the basketball's better and it feels like a playoff atmosphere and we're just getting that atmosphere like 5 months early, I think that's a massive win. Personally, I think that shows that we should then care about it as fans. Also, if it proves over time to be an indication of what teams are actually competitive, and it gives teams the opportunity to get playoff like experience, even for younger teams that are maybe this is their first year of being competitive. If it proves that the NBA Cup is actually representative of what's going to happen come April and May, then I think we're really going to care about it. Like, I think this would be a different conversation. Again, not to sound biased, if the Celtics are in this thing, right? If, and maybe it ends up being that way anyway. If a team like Dallas or OKC, a team with real title aspirations, ends up winning this thing, maybe we'll think about it a little bit differently. I think going back to last year, that it was cool in the moment for sure. Like, the NBA was super excited having LeBron James be the first NBA in-season tournament MVP, and the Lakers, the biggest franchise in the league, being the ones to hoist the trophy. But ultimately, I think it got a little bit lessened by the fact that the Lakers were easily disposed of in round 1, and nobody ever really took them seriously as a competitor for the NBA title. So I think that overall the league has to be prioritizing. If I'm Adam Silver, if I'm in the league office, I want a team like Dallas or OKC or Milwaukee or New York. One of those 4 teams is what I'm hoping for as a league office ultimately wins the cup, because I think those are the teams with not only large fan bases and real title aspirations. I think that's the teams that the people are taking the most seriously as actual title contenders right now. And if one of those teams ends up winning it, the NBA can be like, see, look, it means something, right? Like, we all said OKC was really good and now they won the NBA Cup. Who knows if this is a momentum builder for them? So, final thought, I guess I'm still a little frustrated with the chaos of the final night of the NBA in-season tournament and trying to sort out what every team needs to get in and whatever. But maybe I'm just a nerd and I'm a little bummed out that my team got basically bounced in the final night 2 years in a row because it came down to point differential. Like, I'd love to say expand it beyond 4 games for the group stage, but frankly, I understand they don't want to oversaturate the NBA in-season tournament and add more games than what they need to. So in general, I still like it. It gives us something to talk about. It gives more allure to NBA games in November and December than what we would have otherwise. And I think overall it's a net positive. If the players seem to care about it, and obviously a lot of this is pending before what the actual semifinals, quarterfinals, championship looks like. But right now I still really like the NBA Cup, and I think it is a positive addition to the NBA schedule. Now, the injury sucks a little bit. That's kind of the dark side of this, is like they load the schedule up so much over the past couple weeks that maybe that's correlated to the injuries. We won't know that for sure until we see the data over the span of a couple of years. But besides the schedule being a little too loaded and adding more games for the teams that ultimately make it to the finals, I think the NBA Cup has been a huge positive the past couple of years. Next week, I really do hope to bring a guest on, but if not, I am thinking my backup plan, if I don't get a guest, is to have a tier ranking podcast next week. There's just a lot of teams in the NBA that I just haven't had the opportunity to talk about in a longer form fashion on this podcast quite yet. It can be tricky to work different teams into these games. And so I think next week doing a tier ranking where we can really sort out, okay, we're more than a quarter of the way into the season, nearing a third of the season. Which of these teams is contenders? Which of these teams are one piece away? And which of these teams are tanking? Going through that exercise is going to be a lot of fun. So before I let you guys go, again, thank you as always for supporting, for listening, for watching Words with Wallace. Be sure to follow the podcast at Words with Wallace on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe so you never miss a new episode. Also, follow the show on social media at Words with Wallace on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. Be sure to support the content there, and I will talk to you guys next week. Peace.